Cool. I think this is a good opportunity to jump into it. Lindsay, are you good on your end?
Yep, I'm good. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Um, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We see a lot of people trickling in as we're going through this, so welcome. Welcome to our webinar on generative AI training, how to use Ada for your SightX projects. We're excited to spotlight one of our most innovative features yet. We released Ada just last quarter, and we've seen great results and usage across our clientele. We've gotten plenty of questions around like what is Ada? How do we best utilize AI for our company? What are some actual use case examples? We're here to help answer those questions today and really simplify AI usage for you today as well. Before we get started, just some technical logistics. I just want to note that we are recording this session, so we'll provide the full recording alongside some helpful resource articles after the call. You can share the recording with your colleagues that were not able to make the session. I'll probably send a follow-up to everybody that registered as well. I've gotten a few emails saying they couldn't make it, so everybody will get a link to the recording. Don't worry about that. We also have the QA function turned on for the webinar. I know somebody already used it, so it should be working. We'll be answering any questions at the end of the webinar. If we don't get to your question, we'll just send a follow-up email directly to you. So jumping forward, let's start off with some formal introductions. We're joined by our amazing AI product manager at SightX, Lindsay Richmond. Lindsay has been a product manager specializing in AI for over 4 years and also worked in management consulting in the past. At SightX, she helped develop Ada from OpenAI's APIs, starting with a prototype in a Jupyter notebook. My name is Peter M. I'm a customer success manager here at SightX. I'm excited to help host today's session. My role over at SightX is to help ensure everyone gets the most value out of the product at SightX. We're here to spotlight one of our most asked about features today. So hopefully you guys will use this moving forward. So this is the overall agenda of how the webinar call will go today. We'll make this as efficient and information-packed call for you as possible. We'll start off with a high-level overview of Ada functionalities of what Ada can and cannot do. After that, we'll split our segment of Ada into pre-launch use cases as well as post-launch use cases. Ada is here to assist your SightX usage from building from scratch all the way to analysis of your responses. We have Ada accessible throughout the entire SightX platform, so we'll be going through a demo of Ada during that segment, so stay tuned. We'll then go into a few frequently asked questions that we've gotten from clients and tackle any questions I see in the chat. So this is just another reminder, add any questions you might have in the QA function in Zoom, and we'll do our best to get to each one. And then lastly, we'll wrap up the webinar with just additional ways that SightX can support you and your research team moving forward, as well as we'll send out some follow-up with additional resources. All right, so we'll start off with what Ada can and cannot do. As you can see from the slide, Ada has a ton of capabilities. As with all AI features, it's constantly learning tendencies, adjusting to your needs, and adapting. We've gotten like common questions to answer some of the frequently asked questions about what Ada can do. Ada can help create tests and surveys completely from scratch, match you with appropriate templates, help calculate your sample size, analyze and answer questions about all the data that you receive from your respondents, summarize key findings, as well as generate product descriptions, ad copy, or blog posts based on the data that you have. As far as what Ada currently cannot do, uh, it cannot replace our existing knowledge base hub. So we have our full support website that's still active. It has all the necessary help articles for your support. So if you have questions about what a max diff or what a conjoint can do, our support site has all the articles to help you build, analyze, use those advanced methodologies. Ada cannot answer technical questions. So if you run into some kind of issue on the platform, best next step would be to contact our support team or contact your customer success manager directly, and they can assist with any technical problems. And lastly, Ada does not access the internet in real time. This is very high level. I'm going to pass it on to Lindsay, who will go into Ada in more details.
Thank you, Peter. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Lindsay Richmond, the product manager of SightX AI, who created Ada. Happy to see you all here today. I know many of you have probably used Ada before. Some of you may be new to Ada. So our purpose in this webinar is really to, give you insights on how to either get it started using Ada or how to better utilize Ada if she's already part of your workflow. And we'll break up this session into two main parts. The first is going to be what you can do before you launch Ada and surveys. So for example, if you are interested in working with Ada before you launch a survey, there's a few things you can do, and we've highlighted the top ones that customers have been using. So the first one is custom test creation. And what's great about this is you can give Ada a simple text prompt, as little as a sentence, where you may specify your industry or your goal, or you could write a bit more, and Ada can work with you to design a personalized survey tailored to your specific research needs and business goals. So if you want something entirely custom, you can give Ada, everything from a simple prompt to something a bit more complex and get a custom test. And as you'll see in the demo, Ada typically will give you 10 questions to start, but you can add as many questions as you'd like. They could be your own questions. They could be additional questions that Ada suggests. But, between Ada and the versatility of the SightX platform, you have a lot of ways you can customize tests with this. The second would be test matching. And this is where you might have a better idea of what you want. You might want something that's more standard within the industry, or you might have a more specific goal. Or rather than just starting from scratch with Ada, you'd rather find a specific test. So we also go through an example in the demo of where somebody who's looking for the optimal price for a product is matched with a test. And typically what you'll get here is something that's a bit more standard in the market research and insights world. So you might get, for example, a key driver analysis test or a conjoint analysis test. So really with test matching, Ada, takes your goals also from a simple written prompt, and she figures out the best way to match you with the best test that SightX offers. The third thing that we found customers have been using a lot is sample size creation. So you can give Ada 3 numbers, and what she'll do is she'll recommend an optimal survey size or a sample size for your survey. So if you have questions about how to calculate that, you can just give Ada these 3 numbers. She goes into a little bit of detail describing them, but you can also ask her for more information, and she will, based on what you give her, recommend a sample size for your test. And it's very simple, and she can give you that number within a matter of seconds. So with that said, we're going to start the demo, and we're going to start off just showing you the first, 3 things that we discussed plus an additional thing, because Ada is highly multilingual, which is exciting. And I know that many people who are our clients have used Ada to create multilingual tests. So the first example, when we're starting out, whenever you open Ada, you'll get this welcome message, and she'll just give you a little bit of information about what she can do. And so this is really what we're going to discuss in this webinar. She's very good at creating the best test for you and analyzing your data. And if you want to create a custom test, what you can do is you can click on the button under the popular topics that says create a custom test, or you could write something similar in the text box that you see below in white. Either way is a perfectly valid way to do it. So in general, when I go through, because the popular topics are so easy, I'll just start with them. And if you click on this, what you'll see is a simple response from Ada that just tells you, okay, just give me some information about your business and your goals for the test. And the more information you give her, the more specific she can get, but she can also give you really good results based on, simple prompts. And often we just know what we want on a high level, and that's why we want the custom test in the first place. So in this case, I'm just saying that I'm a consumer packaged goods company, and I'd like feedback on packaging for a product that I'm about to launch. And so we work with many companies. Many companies in this industry really benefit from market research. So Ada said, sure, great. And she's given you 10 sample questions. And you can always tell her that, you want 8 of the 10 questions. You can always revise things, both, when you're talking to Ada or once the test is built in SightX. Both are valid ways to do things. And depending on how you like to work, you might prefer one to the other. But if you do want this packaging test, all you have to do is just say something affirmative in her console. So yes or okay, and it accepts the test. And then Ada will just give you this loading screen for a few seconds. And typically it takes maybe anywhere from like 5 to 15 seconds for Ada to create a test. She's very fast. And your screen will load, and you'll get this bubble at the top that says success. So your test has been created, and you can just minimize Ada's console. And then you can go through your test and take a look. And what's nice about Ada, and especially compared to other solutions that some other platforms have, is that she'll give you a variety of different question types. So rather than just getting multiple choice, for example, you could get text, multiple choice, scale, grid in some cases. So she'll always give you, different question types. And you in SightX, if you're working in SightX, you can easily change the question type too. Um, Another thing that you can do is if you want to add more questions to the test, you can. And what you'll see here is that your popular topics have expanded. So anytime you do a major action with Ada, with a project or launch a project or have it analyzed, she'll populate these popular topics are actually custom to your test. So I can select one of these, for example, add questions about desired outcomes. And if I click on this, Ada will give me some additional question ideas around this subject. My other option is I can just manually type in anything I want, and then Ada will give me some ideas. So I could just say like add questions about location or add questions about demographics, and she'll add some for you. And so in this case, since you've already launched the project, she'll just add them to your tests. But if for some reason that you don't like them, you can easily delete the questions and work with her again. But you're by no means, once you launch a test in SightX with Ada, you're not set in stone. You can continue adding questions either completely on your own or with Ada. So I think this offers a bit more flexibility than AI solutions on other platforms. Um, Another thing you can do with Ada is you can use her to find the best test for your business. And this works functionally quite a bit like creating a custom test, but it's a little bit different. Because in this case, we're really looking for a match. So rather than creating something entirely new that's totally custom to your industry and your goal and maybe other, criteria that you have, we're really looking for the best tests that SightX has. And, at SightX, we have a number of different tests and experiments that are really helpful when you're doing marketing research. So I'm just saying for my prompt this time, I would like to be able to find the optimal price for a new product. And, this is something that a lot of companies, grapple with when they launch a new product. Well, how do I price it, right? And so in getting pricing right is really critical for the launch and for revenue and whatnot. So in this case, Ada has found one of our experiments, which is the Van Westendorp test. And this is one of our pricing experiments. And she gives you a little bit of information. A Van Westendorp test has 4 questions, and she's given you what they are. And as you'll see when the test populates in your projects section, there's a lot more to it than that, but she's given you a good preview so you have a sense of what this test entails. So again, I've accepted this test. And just within a matter of seconds, she's created it for me. So again, I'm just minimizing her console, and then she's gone ahead and given a little bit of information in the product or service description. I mean, you could have her do this. You could also fill it out yourself. It's, I think, pretty simple to do in our platform, but she's actually built an entire experiment for you, and it's pre-populated with all of the things you need to get started. But of course, you can customize, the question stem or the options to fit, your own needs. So the nice thing is I think Ada does a lot of the legwork for you. She can match things that really fit your needs and goals, but you still have the ability within SightX to do a lot of customization. Now, one area where Ada really shines is multilingualism, and she's actually conversant in over 50 different languages. And so within those 50 are most of the major languages we use globally. And we at SightX have a lot of clients who work globally and, are running surveys in a lot of different places around the world. So let's say I'm working in English, since it's my first language, but I'm working for a fashion company or I'm doing research in fashion, and I want a survey that gauges people's their fashion preferences in Spain. So, and I want this test in Spanish. So the nice thing about this is I can use my native language, English, and I can actually ask Ada for a test in Spanish. It could also be a test in Chinese or Hungarian, for example, and Ada will be able to give me that. And it's just very nice because I don't have to worry about switching to another language to ask her things. So again, she's putting a little thought into this. And as you can see, she's given me a test in Spanish. So I'm just going to minimize her console again. And then just, quickly scrolling through this test, you can see that everything is in Spanish. So again, we have a range of different question types, scale, multiple choice, and text. And so she's given you a few things to work with here that I think are really good. But the nice thing is that this test is in Spanish. And opening up her console again, she's given you an idea of what this test looks like in Spanish. The nice thing is if I want to continue asking her questions in English, I can. Just because she's responding in Spanish doesn't mean that I can't continue talking in English and get answers from her. So the nice thing is you can go back and forth between languages. I know many of our clients at SightX are multilingual. So if you want to converse in multiple languages with Ada, you can. And the last thing we'll show you for the things you can do before you launch a survey is, we often have questions when we launch a survey about, well, how many people do I actually need for my survey when they respond? Like, what is going to give me like a really good results to my test that I feel confident about? And so under your popular topics, the second topic is calculate my sample size. And so if you click on that, and to be clear, you don't even have to have a survey if you just want to look into this. before you even start building. But she'll tell you that she needs three things: the population size, the confidence level, and the margin of error. And you can ask her for a little bit more detail about any of these three things. She has given you two typical confidence levels, which are 95 and 99, and those are industry standard. But again, if you need more information on what those might entail, you can ask her a clarifying question. I'm just going to put some typical numbers in. I'll put my population size at 1,000, my confidence level at 95, and my margin of error at 5, and that's pretty typical. And all I have to do is just put those numbers in. I don't even have to put commas in. I just have to put them in the right order. And she quickly gives me, based on your criteria, like these are the number of respondents you need. So it's really nice. And, it works on lots of different numbers. So if, for example, I have a survey with very different needs, whose population size is very different, I can just do this again and get that same calculation. So let's say instead of 1,000, I have 10,000, 99 and 5. So I'm going to use a higher confidence level at this point. And she's telling me now I need 370 respondents. So that's really good that, she can give me a different number for different attributes. So again, this is something where if like you have different needs for your survey, depending on the criteria that Ada is setting forward, she will give you some different numbers that I think are really helpful. And, this is standard with industry practices. Next up is post-launch. And this is really exciting to me because I think this is where Ada really shines as a generative insights consultant, and that she can actually create a lot of content and ask novel questions about your project. It's always exciting to launch a survey in SightX and, get the data back and dig into like all your questions and really, get an idea of what your respondents think. And so on that note, Ada can answer questions about data analysis. And so she can answer questions that are contained in your survey, sometimes in a way that maybe is a bit more efficient for you as a researcher. She can also answer novel questions that are not contained in your survey, but are contained within your data. So they may not be a specific question in your survey, but they are questions that can be answered through your data. And then she can also analyze open-ended questions and provide things like sentiment analysis, and then also do transformative work with that data. Another thing that's been popular with our clients are executive summaries, and in general, information that you can use for reporting and maybe information for internal stakeholders. So in this case, the executive summary would look like a high-level summary that captures the critical findings from your study, making it easier for you, your executives, or people within your company to make informed decisions using your data. And the nice thing is that at the end, when she pulls out the highlights from your survey, she also provides a call to action. And you can work with Ada to reshape your executive summary, both in the way that it looks, but also in the level of detail she goes into with the content. Then the third one is content creation broadly. And this is where Ada can, use your information to write detailed product descriptions, add copy, and even blog posts that appeal to your audience. And what you can ask her to do, and what she generally does by default, is pull sort of the best of your survey data out to really emphasize, what customers like. So if you have a lot of questions, and many of us do in our surveys about, what makes a customer satisfied or what they really like or don't like about a product, she can use, what respondents say is the best of your product or service and highlight that within the writing. So it's really cool because, you are able to quickly craft these descriptions for your service or product that are built off of customers' preferences and the voice of the customer, which I think is a really good way to approach things. So if you want to use Ada in the analyze section, you have to go into a project that contains data. So if your project doesn't contain data from respondents yet, you won't be able to use her here. But once you have a project with data in it, which this one does, it has 118 respondents. It's a concept test that looks at salty snacks. Just go to question analysis, which is where the bulk of your data is, and you can open up your console. And what you'll see is you have 4 popular topics at the top. These will always be here, everything from executive summary to ad campaign. The ones below, and usually there are either 4 or 5, are all going to be customized to the specific tests that you have or the data on your page. So there's a few sections in Analyze we've enabled Ada for, and every time you go to those are going to refresh depending on the data on the page. So to get an executive summary, it works similarly to the way that we just showed you with pre-launch. You click on the button, the button that you want, which in this case is the top button. You can also type. And Ada gives you an executive summary that pulls out like the high-level insights from your survey, and it's got to group them thematically. So in this test, there were more than 5 questions, but in a lot of cases, the questions sort of would be a little bit different, but would sort of revolve around the same general theme. So it's kind of nice because she's taken like a larger survey and grouped things together in a way that I think is really helpful. And then you can see at the bottom, she's put in a call to action that's basically saying, okay, because of what you found in your survey, these are the recommendations we can make to how you want to highlight things, how you want to promote the product, and retain customers, and how you might want to market things. Now, this looks great, but let's say that I'm presenting this to someone, I really need it to look like a written report and I want it in paragraph format. The nice thing about working with Ada is I can just give her a simple command and say, rewrite this for me in paragraph format. And after just a few moments, she'll be able to give me something that looks very different, right? I could do this in Word, for example, but you can just in a sentence have Ada rewrite this for you so you don't have to do that formatting yourself. In addition, I could have her go into other topics. I could say, give me an additional paragraph about the following survey questions, or like go deeper into the following insights, or break this down a bit more. I could also have her break this down into material for slides for a presentation. So it's the possibilities with Ada with your survey data are really pretty much endless, and I think it's really cool to see how you can work with her, to work with what she originally gives you and either extend it or reshape it to better work for whomever you're presenting this to. So this has been a really popular feature we've had, and I think a good thing to highlight in the webinar. Another good one that's a little newer that we launched, I believe in December, was writing a product description with your data. So what's nice about this is in a lot of tests, concept tests, or just tests that assess customer feedback or how aware people are of your brand, for example, or what they like about it, or what they like or don't, or what they like or dislike about certain services or products, you're going to get a feel for what customers really like. And that gives you an idea of what you might want to do in terms of promoting your product, or how you might even want to write like the language that you put on the packaging for a product, or a website for a product, or a social media campaign. So I've asked Ada for a product description. I just use the popular topic. Again, I can type something similar and get similar results. And she's given me a lot of different options here. And she's kind of broken them down by like different attributes that Siggy Snacks has, different things that like somebody might want if they were promoting the product. And she also gives me a call to action. So in this case, it seems like she's saying to visit the website or nearby grocery store to discover a wide range of Siggy Snacks flavors to find your new flavor. So if you have questions about how you distributed your product, or like what customers wanted to see or their shopping habits, she probably would be able to give you something very specific. But in some cases, it might be something that's a little bit more general, but that's something you can edit. So this is pretty long. And so if I wanted to take this description, write one paragraph, I could use the same method that I did with the executive summary. I just give her a simple text command. And in most cases, you can do this in, a single sentence. And then, I'm telling her not only to write one paragraph, but emphasize the best parts of, what the customers really like about Siggy Snacks. And to me, it's really cool because again, you're working with the voice of the customer here. So you have a lot of confidence that, what Ada is pulling out is really maybe speaking to the people you intend to market to. And so she's giving me a paragraph. Looking this over, depending on how I want to use this might still feel a little long. So what I could do is then say reduce this to 1 to 2 sentences. I could just get more specific with her. And she's still giving me the call to action, which is good. So I think this is a really neat thing that you can do with your survey data. A lot of this will depend on the survey that you ran. Some surveys are going to be a better fit for this than others, and some products are going to be a better fit. But in a lot of cases, it could be useful for people. Now, this part below, we're going to switch gears a little bit. I've showed you two examples where we use Ada to create content. In this part of the presentation, I'm just going to show you what it looks like when you actually ask Ada a more in-depth question. And so the popular topics that I have below are ones that fit with this particular test, and Ada's come up with them. And every time you launch a project, she'll come up with unique questions that address the type of tests that you have and also the type of questions that you're asking customers. So I just chose assess the factors that influence snack purchasing decisions. I'm curious, I want to dig in deeper. I've got great data here, but on a more, qualitative level, or just in a way that summarizes things a bit better, I'd like to know what this looks like. So Ada's given me a really good job. She's done a good job here. She's given me good writing. I could use this as part of an executive summary or on a slide. Again, I can also ask her to refine this if I want her to, scale back a bit or go more into depth with some of her findings. But she's basically telling me, like, based on the way people have ranked things, like this is the level of importance that they attributed to each of the following attributes. And then, the survey also highlighted what was important to the customer and what they have a preference for. And basically, this is a summary of what I found. And the nice thing is, again, like this sort of she's pulling together insights from lots of different questions under the same theme. So as a researcher, this can save you quite a bit of time because, if you were to go through these questions yourself, you'd have to do the analysis and you'd have to do the write-up. So you can use Ada to speed up your research considerably. So in this particular example, I used something from her popular topics, but you can also type whatever you want in her console. Just keep in mind that, she is limited to whatever you have in your survey. If you ask her something that's out of bounds, she'll usually tell you that you need to do more research, which is reasonable. but you can ask her actual questions from the survey. So I'm just going to give a very simple example just to demonstrate the point. So one of the questions in this test is what gender do you identify as? And you can see if I'm for female, it's 49.15. So that's the number. And then if I open Ada's console back up, if I ask that question, you'll be able to see that Ada will give me data from my survey. So let's say you have a really big survey and you just want to ask a general question and like you've just got a ton of questions, it might actually be more efficient for you to ask Ada questions directly. So I just asked what percentage of survey takers were female. What's nice is she gives me that percentage, 49.15. She also tells me the total number of participants and how many identified as female. So she gives me the raw numbers, which might be a bit more efficient than the chart that I looked at. So depending on, again, what you want as a researcher, this could be really helpful, especially with a larger survey where, you just want an answer to a question quickly. And, you don't necessarily want to have to look through, all of your data in the question analysis section. So again, the option here, it's only limited to the content of your survey, what you can do with Ada really in the analysis section. And right now, she is only working with text data, but, we do have plans to incorporate other models, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So the last example is going to be working with open-ended text. I'm going to go into another project that has data that has a question like that. This one has 100 respondents. And usually you'll know, but in case you're working with like, data from a team or, you might share with the researchers. I know I have a text question by going to that bar, seeing the T, clicking on it. So there's my text question. And this question is, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of self-driving cars? So if I just go to answers and click on it, that expands my answers. And what's nice about this is I get things like brands, but I also get words like unreliable or dangerous. So you can see there's sediment here. And so it's nice because we're actually getting the opinions of people within these answers, which is really interesting. So I'm going to go back to Ada and I'm going to scroll down. And this is something, again, you can just ask Ada directly. If you have a open-ended text question, you can ask her to run sediment analysis. Just keep in mind that not every open-ended text question would necessarily have answers that convey sediment, but most do. And so, if you have that, you'll automatically get this question. And so I only have one in the survey. So she'll ask you for the number and she'll give you the question. You just put in the number that you want. And she's given me a breakdown of what was positive, negative, and neutral. And this is helpful because now I know that for the most part, people's sentiment about self-driving cars was positive. But, it's only 60%. So there was quite a bit of negativity and neutrality as well. So my next question is, in the spirit of, extending Ada's abilities well beyond, the popular topics that we give you or, the sort of more general things a researcher might do, I can just ask her, well, give me some examples of like what you found just to get a sense of like what her methodology was. And I can see here that this is pretty straightforward. She's kind of gone, I think, and, found like a lot of adjectives and some nouns that like convey certain things. And then what I would do next, I mean, this really depends on your goals. This might be enough. You might just want to, maybe you're compiling a report and you just want to go through this data quickly. It's not easy to go through it. But what you can do is, again, you can extend this and think about, well, how could I use this data to create something new for the product, And so in this case, what I'm going to do is say, based on the positive sentiment, and this is pretty similar to what you saw with the product description, but it does, I think, it pulls from a specific question a little bit more deeply. Write me a description of this product. So I'm going to say people have a positive sentiment about self-driving cars. Based on what they've said, write a product description for me. And I think she's done a really nice job with this. The language is great. I think, we use GPT as Ada's model. It's a very strong writer. And so she's really, pulled a lot of these words, like innovation, for example, was one of the words used in positive sentiment. And I think convenience was there too. And so she's really done a good job of, actually using some of the sentiment that the customers conveyed within your survey to write a really nice description of what, what a self-driving car might look like and something that you could use to market your product or, use for a description of a product somewhere. So this is sort of concludes the overview of Ada's post-launch capabilities. So what's next? So we're really deeply, engaged. We're looking forward to engaging you more in conversations. I know we already have been, and there may be some people on this webinar who we've spoken to about Ada directly. So if that's the case, thank you for your feedback. Just know that we're actively working to incorporate it into our next release of Ada, which will happen just within a few months. And so we just pulled out some emerging themes based both on what we've gotten for customer feedback and in the direction we think generative AI is going in, in the strongest sense. And The first one is slides with visualizations. A lot of people have asked us, well, can we use the content that we create with Ada to create slides? And the short answer is yes, but to create an actual PPTX file within Ada, for example, you can't do right now. But that is something that we're actively working on. And we want to also give people the ability to create visualizations like bar or pie charts that can go with that data. So, or even in some cases thematic images. So the nice thing with that is like if for example Ada gives you some information that goes beyond the bounds of your survey, and it would go beyond the bounds of what you could download from SightX's platform, you could get novel slides with novel content that was still related to your survey data. Another one we've gotten a request for a lot is use with multiple projects. I mean, this is probably going to be a larger initiative within SightX itself, but in this case, rather than just having everything tied to the project level with Ada, Ada would be able to work across multiple projects. So if you were running a campaign and you ran a similar survey or the same survey 6 times, she could give you an update on the data across those 6 surveys. So that's really nice because she could look at how trends changed over time and like how your users' behavior changed over various campaigns. The other thing she can do is if you do a certain number of things within SightX within a year or a quarter, you could just tell her, like, give me a summary of everything I've done in SightX for the past year or quarter. And again, if you're reporting to somebody, that could be really useful data for your internal stakeholders. The next one is image generation. And so I think this is a model there. Several good, strong models have been out for a while. OpenAI, for example, released DALL-E 3 a few months ago and has already integrated it into ChatGPT's Plus account. So if you use GPT-4, it now has DALL-E 3 automatically integrated. So we know that if you can generate images, you can do a lot of cool things. So rather than just creating, say, a product description or an ad with text, Ada could actually create an image for you. And we would be able to do this in a way that's highly automated with your survey data. But, as I showed throughout the webinar, with Ada, you can always, ask her to change something or ask her to dig deeper. And so you can actually work with her to, edit images and craft images that could, be a good complement to whether it's presentation material or, collateral for marketing and content in general. You could work with her to create that. And I think that will be a really good complement to, the work with tech she's doing already. And the final thing is next best actions. And these are similar to the popular topics that you saw on the right-hand side of Ada's console. The difference will be that they will be dynamic. So they will depend on what you say in your conversation and they'll appear below your conversation. So once you do a big milestone within Ada, whether it's creating a survey or creating an executive summary or, querying open-ended text data, you'll have, anywhere between maybe 2 to 3 options that will kind of suggest the next best action for you. So it could be like reformat my executive summary or go deeper into this. Or, if you get an image that looks a certain way, she might suggest a way to edit it or optimize it. If you do sentiment analysis, she'll probably suggest like several things that you can do with that data. Write me a way like based on negative feedback, explain to me how I can improve my product. So I think we're really excited about that because that's really, I think, going to be helpful for emboldening users to really continue the conversation with Ada in a way that's again closely tied to the goals and feedback given in a survey, and to the point about multiple projects, eventually multiple surveys that are done across time in the platform. So we're very excited to release these soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Take
Thank
a
you,
sip of
Peter.
water. I don't know that was a lot of information that you had to share. Thank you so much. So that wraps up the demo, best practices, how to effectively use Ada. As you can see on the screen here, we're here to support in any way possible. We have a full resource knowledge base that we'll share in a follow-up email, as well as a customer success team at your disposal. So feel free, if you have any direct questions, contact your customer success manager directly. I did get a lot of questions in the QA function. So I don't know if you see it, Lindsay, on your end, but there are a ton of questions that came in. So
Yeah.
we'll do our best to tackle most of these. So we'll do this kind of interview style with Lindsay as she's the expert here. Feel free to add any more questions in the meantime in that QA feature. So I know we're getting a lot of like similar questions that you probably answered already, Lindsay, but we'll kind of just answer it again. One common one that we're seeing is, can Ada make presentations?
So we're working on that right now. So she can create text for presentation slides. So if you ask her, even if it's a question in SlightX and you want like a little bit more context, you could ask her to write a description of that particular question and summarize it. And, in the example that we saw in the webinar, she gave a little bit more information than you'd see in the bar chart. In addition, you can ask any question and you can get that. And I think the idea behind the visualizations is we're kind of looking, and Right now, GPT-4 has an analytics model that's integrated with it that actually can create bars and like bar charts and pie charts and even some more sophisticated type of graphs. So this is something we're looking into, and I think it would really be a really great asset for Ada because it's once you have this data, often you want to share it with people, right? And I know that these things are very time consuming. I mean, having worked in management consulting, it's very time consuming to create these presentation decks, and so Ada has such a with Ada, you could do tons of things beyond just what you get with SightX too. So we are working on that. So my hope is that that's something that we could release in the next few months.
Perfect. Probably the most asked question I'm seeing is what's the security of Ada like as far as data privacy?
So we work with OpenAI's APIs. We don't, it's not, Ada's not ChatGPT. So your data never is not stored by, it stays in SightX. It's not used by OpenAI to train models. It doesn't go to OpenAI. It's not retained by OpenAI and it's not owned in any way by OpenAI. In addition, anything that you create with Ada is owned by you. So even if you create things within the SightX platform with Ada, you own them. So if you create an executive summary or an ad, that's your piece of content to distribute as you like. Just because you create it with Ada within our platform doesn't mean that it belongs to us. So I know issues, with provenance and especially with text to image models are really, big considerations right now. And so on two front, number one, like the data is not used by OpenAI in any way. It stays within SightX. And number two, anything you generate within SightX's platform is owned by you, the customer, and not by OpenAI or SightX.
Okay. Here's another one. Can Ada spit out images slash videos?
Um, so that's something again in the next few months, with an integration with a model like DALL-E 3, we would be able to allow Ada to produce text to images. Many of you on this webinar might have seen last Friday that OpenAI also, to great fanfare, released a model called Sora, which is text to video. And the APIs are not publicly available yet because they're doing their team is doing quite a bit of security testing on it right now, which I think is really smart. But once that becomes publicly available, we can take a look at it. It right now only does work up to 60 seconds, but the results have looked incredible. And that's another area where we can do a lot of automation. Like, for example, anytime Ada writes something for you, like a description, that description can be a prompt that not only produces something in text, but could then be used to produce an image of something like a self-driving car or an image of a short video clip with a self-driving car that has all of the great things that your customers like about self-driving cars in the content and in the inspiration for the actual creative piece. So text to image is something that I think could be realized within a few months. Text to video, I think, is going to take a little bit longer, but it could very well come, if not, like not within 2 to 3 months, but within 6 months, and certainly something that I think can happen this year. It's really going to depend on, when OpenAI opens up their APIs, but they typically move pretty quickly. So I would think we're looking at months probably. And so that's, we can definitely keep everybody aware of what's going on in terms of Ada's progress. But I definitely think, even for presentations, videos can be really engaging. So, I've talked a little bit about, the potential for using like marketing collateral, like a short video clip that you could release on Facebook or LinkedIn, for example, but you could also use it in a presentation deck as well. So yeah, absolutely. Like we definitely want things to be very multimodal for Ada in a near future state.
Great. I'm seeing some questions about kind of building with Ada. One person is asking, is it possible to add and incorporate logic when you're building? For example, first question is, do you have an air fryer? If they select yes, then they see another question.
You might be able to do that with Ada. We didn't really include that in the first release because we know that there's a lot of ways that you can do that within SightX. And when it comes to things that are highly, like where there are a lot of buttons to press, for example, it can actually be faster just to like press the buttons. And sometimes people appreciate the visual interface of actually seeing the question and setting the logic up and like knowing that branching of the question is going to be there as soon as they click a button. So in a limited way, you probably, if there's simple examples, you probably could do them with Ada. But in general, like the way we envisioned this was that it really more advanced things probably should be done within SightX because they are more advanced survey techniques and they're probably just easier on the customer from a UI perspective to do within SightX. But we can look into that a bit more. I mean, if we're getting a lot of feedback that, hey, this is something I really want to do with Ada, because it's relatively simple to type, we can definitely look into more testing for that.
Here's a translation question. If we use multilingual translation, for example, if you translate from English to Spanish, is it easy to translate it back to English?
Yeah, I think you could just ask Ada to create that same survey in English. So I would just have her create the same, like say, create this exact same project in English. So if you had her create in Spanish, just mention that you want the exact same project in English. And I don't see what the problem would be with getting it in English or any other language for that matter. So again, if you want Hungarian, as long as you were using the same project and the same questions, I think Ada could easily translate them into from one language into another, whether it was back and forth between two or, three or more.
Perfect. I'm seeing a question about quotas. Does Ada or can Ada create quotas based on like census rep?
I don't think so. We didn't really, other than sample size calculation, we didn't really include a lot in the first release for the distribute section. But again, we can look into that if we're getting a lot of asks for it, because I think that's probably. But I know we're making a lot of improvements on the SightX platform to the way that people can sort of get their panels right now. So I mean, I think we can look into that, but I do think that there's a lot of improvements that we're making that probably enable that within SightX in other ways besides using Ada.
Perfect. Um, Here's a great question. What are best practices for citing slash referencing content produced by Ada?
Um, I think that's up to the individual and maybe their company. I mean, it's never a bad idea to cite things that come from AI. And I think a lot of people feel like, things should be cited. So you could just say that content is produced by AI. I mean, you could say that it's produced by Ada or SightX's generative AI insights consultant. So you could use her name if you wanted. I mean, she is, by the way, named after Ada Lovelace, just so you know, the famous mathematician and computer scientist. But you can also just say that this was created with the assistance of AI. Like generally, that's what I've seen. Like that it was assisted, like that it was created with in tandem with AI. So whether you want to be more specific about what that AI was, that it was Ada versus GPT or just AI in general, I think it would be up to you.
Perfect. Can Ada tell the LOI of a survey, length of interview?
Um, so this one's interesting because if we just get the text, like in theory, she could tell you like the number of words on average that each person had in their interview. She also might be able to estimate how long they'd be. If we got the timestamps as part of the text, then what she could do, she could average the timestamps and tell you the average per interview. So there's a few ways we could do it. It would rely on her getting information from the text data though. So the short answer is in some ways, yes. And the larger answer is if you wanted to literally know the time, the average of the time, we would technically need the timestamp, but she might be able to make a pretty good inference based on the number of words, for example, in each interview, and then just averaging them. And the number of words we definitely could do. So if by length it means character length, she absolutely can. If by length it means time, she could make an estimate. If she didn't have the timestamps, if we had that data, she could easily just do the calculation.
Awesome. Here's another question. What is the maximum sample size Ada can work with? Is there a limit?
Do you mean if someone distributes the test?
Let's assume so. Yeah,
Okay.
that's all the
I
information I
think it
got
might
here.
depend on the account tier that someone has. So I think like the number of survey respondents you might be able to work with depends on the account tier. Largely speaking, I think maybe what this question is sort of entailing is like if I have X number of respondents in my survey data after I get my survey results back, how much data can Ada work with? That's going to depend on the nature of the data. If it's a quantitative question, in general, it doesn't really matter how big the survey size is. She can work with tons of respondents. If it's qualitative, it's going to largely depend on, well, is this a word? Like, is this, give me one word to describe self-driving cars? That's going to be much easier across a large sample size than a full-scale interview where you've got like 10-minute interviews for like many, many, many different people. And so what we're looking into doing for that is considering a model that has a higher context window because there are many versions of GPT and many of them have higher context windows. And what that means is like whenever you ask Ada for something and when you get something back from her, the length of the like there are two things that go into context. Number one, the amount of data that she has to work with. And number two, the length of what she's giving you back in response. So the larger the context window, the more data she can work with in short. And it really only becomes a problem with open-ended text data because with quantitative data, we can, maybe there's only 5 options. So even if we have a ton of different respondents, we bucket them in just a finite number of responses. But with open-ended text data, we're not only asking for things that are generally more complex, but like people could say anything and use words for anything. And so even when it's a few words, sometimes there could be a lot of variance. So it's really just going to depend on your project and the type of data you're working with. But what I would say is we are looking at models that can handle more data. So if somebody's sort of hitting, a cap where they're finding that Ada can't work with the amount of data in their project, we're working to get models that maybe can handle that size a bit, more literally can handle that size via the context window.
I know we're running out of time here, so we'll go over like one or two more questions really quick. I know there's a ton in here, so
That's
we'll
good.
send a follow-up to answer most of these. I have everybody's names here, I believe, so we'll contact you directly with an answer. Um, this one is just about best practices. Someone has used Ada to create executive summaries in the past, but struggled to get actual percentages put in the summary. Do you have any best practices there, Lindsay, on how to
I'd,
get the numbers in?
Yeah, and this person may have done this. Ada, her prompt does instruct to use numbers. I mean, that's if if that's something that we're getting feedback that that could be happening more. I think that's something that we can easily work on to make Ada do a bit more. It does sometimes depend on the nature of the questions, but in general, most people are going to have at least demographic questions that are quantitative and probably quite a few more. So one thing that I would say is if you're in a position where you have a lot of percentages and you want them, just maybe if Ada gives you the executive summary, just in the same way that I said, rewrite this in paragraph format, you can just literally tell her in your prompt, like, please rewrite this, but give me percentages from the questions. Include quantitative numbers and percentages in the executive summary throughout, your report. So I would just instruct her to do that. But that's also something we can look into and easily, edit in Ada's prompt and update very easily if that's something, that she's not including and being inclusive enough of.
Perfect. Maybe last one here. I lost it. Can Ada generate headlines around each question in the survey?
I wonder what headlines means in this context. If it means like something for marketing or if it means like a description, yes. So the short answer is probably yes, because Ada is very good at text. So I think I would need to know a little bit more about what was meant by headline. But you could easily ask Ada, for example, like summarize my question. You know what the question is, you know what the results were. Like just give me a summary. Like if this were for a presentation, for example, give me a one sentence summary of like what this question means for a presentation. The other thing you could do is if you want a headline for example, marketing purposes, you could ask her for that. You could just say, for each question, give me a tagline or something I can use for marketing. So it really depends on what you want, but just know that Ada, because she's using GPT for the text to text output, is a really strong writer. So as long as you kind of give her clear instructions about what you're using it for and like what your purpose is, probably in a single sentence you could get that and she would be able to do it. And that's not the sort of thing that, unless perhaps you had a massive study, that would be that difficult. So I don't think you'd have a problem with the context window with that. If anything, maybe it would only be a problem if, again, you had a lot of these really big text questions. But if you were to just say, based on the question, summarize it for the presentation, make it more, friendly for a presentation, or pull out the theme from this question so I can use it for the title of a slide, then it really shouldn't matter. Like I think she'd easily be able to do that even with bigger projects.
Awesome. Perfect. Anything you want to point out? I know you see the Q&A. I know there's a ton of questions in there, Lindsay. Is there anything particular you want to answer now
Um,
that stands out?
There was one question, is the executive summary only available for the post-launch option? So the short answer to that is yes, because what we do with that is we want to take the data from your survey and we want to use that within the executive summary. So when you're getting the executive summary, it actually reflects the results of your survey. But I would be really curious why this question was asked, because Ada, in theory, Ada could create an executive summary without the survey data. So if there were a need for that, I'd be curious to know the use case. One thing is, in terms of like integrating a text to image model, of course we want Ada to work post survey as well, because we know we've got all this great, like in general, like this, one of the strengths Ada has is she's able to use your survey data to craft like the best image for you for any given use case, right? But on the other hand, you might want to work with her earlier in your project process to, for example, create images for a concept test. So there might be scenarios where even if you aren't post launch and you haven't gotten your survey data collected yet, you might want to use Ada before that point. And so in any cases where you feel like there's an additional use case, like definitely please feel free to reach out to us, whether it's directly or in the survey that we're going to send after this webinar, and just let us know if there's additional things that you'd like to see, particularly if Ada's already doing them. We can definitely make them clearer within the product.
Perfect. Yeah, there's a ton of questions here that are unanswered, so we'll get to those. I see a lot of familiar names, so we'll follow up directly and get those answered for you. But yeah, thank you everyone again for taking the time to join. We'll follow up with the recording, all the articles, as well as all the key takeaways to help you and your team. So once again, thank you, Lindsay,
Thank
for
you.
helping walk us through it. If you have any more questions, please contact your customer success manager directly.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks everybody for joining.
Have a good day.